When I think about what frame do I put around my life where my best self emerges? So, as a parent of adult children, there will be times when I look at the parts of my kids that are unfinished and not done and still broken and wounded and realize that I had a part in that.
Hey there, welcome to the Global Fringe, hosted by April Diaz. If you want to experience more of our complex, diverse world, lean into these stories. If you've ever found yourself on the fringe of culture, this is for you. Our hope is that in the next few minutes, you feel seen, emboldened, and compelled to more. Welcome in.
Welcome back, everybody. Oh my gosh. This episode is going to be fantastic. I can already just sense it. I'm going to call it right now. You guys are going to love the conversation I'm about to have with Nancy Ortberg. Nancy, welcome to the Global Fringe.
Glad to be at the Global Fringe.
Okay, so for those of you who are maybe jumping in mid-season, this season, we are focusing on this process that I use in coaching of define, design, and do. So first, kind of defining what is reality, defining where you're at right now, your starting point. And in this section of the season, it's the design. And so how do you design what it is that you envision? How do you design getting from point A to point B? And then in a couple of episodes, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into doing the work. You just have to do the work at some point. You know, you can define it, you can design it, but then you got to do what you know you need to do in order to get from here to there. So Nancy, you're just one of my favorite humans. I don't know if I've ever told you that specifically, that is
true. You may
true.
need to get out of the house more often if that's the case.
Girl, I'm out of the house all the time.
Fair enough. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of background on Nancy and our story. So I met, it was probably more just at a distance, knew you in 1997. It's been more than a hot second, 20 plus years ago now. And we were both on staff at a church in Chicagoland, and it was a large place. And so, I was 18 years old, and Nancy was married and had children, and kind of bang and roll. And so she was at a distance, but Nancy was you were one of the first people that I saw, first women that I saw leading and teaching and doing something beyond women's ministry or children's ministry or organizing potlucks. And and you had sass and you had attitude and you said sarcastic things. And I just was like, who is this woman? And I want to be like her when I grow up. And I just watched and learned a lot from you. But it's probably been over the last decade or so that I've had a little bit more of an opportunity to get up close to you, and for mainly you to get up close to me and speak into my life and leadership. And I'm profoundly grateful. You are on my speed dial list when I hit a blockade, when I hit a ceiling, when something goes amok, because I value and trust your counsel and your integrity. So the thing that I really want to dig into with you today are two of the areas that I think I just respect the most about you and love to learn from you. And I want others too. So we're going to talk about self-leadership and building a team.
Okay.
And you wrote a book. It's been over a decade now. It's called Unleashing the Power of Rubber Bands, Lessons in Nonlinear Leadership. You said you wish you had named it something different.
Just Lessons in Nonlinear Leadership. Maybe the rubber bands could have been the subtitle, but
just flip it.
Just overthinking. Yes.
So why is leadership nonlinear?
Oh, because life is nonlinear, because people are nonlinear. There's always a linear component to many things, but it doesn't seem to be the predominant one or the most important one. And I think we can get frustrated easily with people and with leadership and situations if linear is our only or primary model for things.
Yeah, very true. I think you spend a good bit of time in your own leadership, being really thoughtful about designing where you are wanting to go, both in your life and in the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you kind of pull us behind the curtain of Nancy Ortberg's life and tell us a little bit about like what that design process looks like for you? How do you grow yourself, and how do you lead in such a way that is thoughtful in the designing of it?
Sure. So I would say a couple things just to start, that there certainly are periods of my life where I don't do a very good job of that. And so I won't dive into those right now, but just, there are times when I feel like I'm kind of wandering and adrift and not quite sure what to do. So it's important for me to say that because I want to talk about the times when I am more intentional, but I don't want to make it sound like that's the only way I approach self-leadership.
Which is why I freaking love you. You are a few years older than I am, and I'm almost 40.
Yeah.
And
thanks.
I just love, love, love how honest you are about that, because none of us do this perfectly or about 1,000 or do it all the time. And so I think the grace in that just feels so good, because there's so much talk about leadership that can feel very shaming and can feel very like, I can't do that. Are you kidding me? This is not possible. Right. So thank you.
And it's a combination of grace and reality. I just read somewhere where somebody wrote, perhaps the highest level of spiritual maturity is your ability to consent to reality. Mm-hmm. And I just find I spend so much of my time not consenting to reality or fighting it or wanting it to be different. Yeah. And am I possibly at my best self when I consent to reality? So part of that journey of self-leadership, when I am in a place where I'm doing it more intentionally and doing it well, it looks like a couple of things. The first thing is a growing self-awareness. Yeah. I just know myself well enough to know what are the things that work for me. And then how do I be happy for somebody else when something else works for them, and in their enthusiasm to share that with me, I start to feel like, well, I should be adding that to my repertoire too. So all of a sudden I'm living their life and my life, and it doesn't work for me. So I just had a great meeting this morning with a guy, and he just went on and on about how he now goes to the Holy Land every single year. And for him, it is a grounding experience. I went once 20 years ago, and I just don't have the desire to go back again. It was fine. But, in Jerusalem, it was Jesus might have spit here, and 40 feet under, Jesus might have walked here. And don't get me wrong, there were parts of it like the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. There were some places that were deeply meaningful, but that's not it for me. Yeah. And part of self-awareness is getting really okay with the idea that there are going to be 3 or 4 things or practices that really connect you to God. Gary Thomas's book, Sacred Pathways,
absolutely,
I think has been so freeing for me to say it's not this and it's not this. Doesn't mean I should never engage in those practices, but they probably will never be my primary pipeline of connection to God. Yeah. So for me, it is, do I have a weekly rhythm where I am getting out in nature? Where I am actually out, and usually involves doing something physical, but the transcendence and the awe of nature put my soul in the right place in the universe. Relationships, you're coming out here in a couple of days, and we're going to have lunch and go hiking, and that's just going to be like a trifecta for me of somebody I love, great conversation, and out in nature doing a hike after a great meal. What's wrong with any of that? For me, that will be a devotional. Yeah. It doesn't look like sitting alone in my room with the Bible open and a journal. It looks very different, but the power of connecting me to the goodness of God. And I think that's at the heart of it, isn't it? Yeah. It's what are the things that I'm doing on a regular basis that are reminding me that the core of who God is that He is good. Because if I can believe that, and I don't always, I can put my life in the right place and be the best leader, mother, wife, spouse, friend of God, all of that.
And not only is it that God is good, but that we have been created good. And
how could God create? Yeah, how could God create us not to be good if He's good?
Yeah, but that is not the starting point for a lot of people. I think for a lot of us, we start from the place of like, we're really jacked up. And so we've got to repair all this jacked upness. Yes. And no, the starting point is that God is good. We have been created good, and we are broken. Danielle Strickland says that. And I love how she talks about that tension. What were you going to
That's
say about Dallas
beautiful.
Willard?
I'm going to read you a quote that I keep in my Bible, but before that, just that journey to goodness is the right journey. God at his core is not, God's core is not his holiness, his omnipotence, or his omnipresence. It's none of that. At his core is he is good. If he's not good, he can't be holy.
Yeah.
If he's not good, it's bad news that he's omniscient and
Right.
omnipresent.
Yeah.
So Dallas wrote this years ago, and I just love it. He says, the acid test for any theology is this: is the God presented one that can be loved, heart, soul, mind, and strength? If the thoughtful, honest answer is not really, then we need to look elsewhere or deeper. It does not really matter how sophisticated intellectually or doctrinally our approach is. If it fails to set a lovable God, a radiant, happy, friendly, accessible, and totally competent being before ordinary people, we have gone wrong. We should not keep going in the same direction, but turn around and take another road.
Wow.
And that's just kind of true north for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's Mo Willems, the children's book author, who says, if you find yourself in the wrong story, leave.
Oh, geez.
Right?
Where was that 20 years ago?
He probably wrote it 20 years ago. He's been writing books forever. My 7-year-old is obsessed with Mo Willems books. But I think that is that's imperative to self-awareness and self-leadership, is what is the story that we are reflecting back on?
Right.
And how are we co-creating that for the future? And so often our stories are stuck in childhood, and those bad messages that we may have received in childhood that are not like they've not been adulted yet, and
that's so good,
and given a new perspective. So I want to talk a little bit more about brokenness and in the formation of leadership and in our own soul's formation, because I think brokenness is a pretty significant factor. So
I so agree.
What's your thinking around brokenness?
So again, my first thought is, everybody that's listening, I do hope you have a great Christian counselor. And I mean a great one, because there's some bad ones out there, but just a really good guide, maybe a spiritual formation director or a counselor to help you process all that we're going to talk about. But I think, our DNA is, we were created for a perfect world. Yeah. We live in a broken world. That means we live right in the middle of one of the most difficult tensions that exist in the universe. And that's where God lives. Yeah. So until we learn to live in our brokenness, we probably won't find God. And the redemption that's possible when we understand our brokenness in the context of our belovedness. That's pretty profound. And that's a hard-fought journey, and it's probably a lifelong journey, don't you think?
Yeah, because we're constantly bumping into the brokenness of the world, of others, and then how it triggers ours.
And even, for those of you that have kids, oh man, where do you even start? Like, what you do with one kid just works great, and it fills them up, and it's just what they needed. And so you do that with the next kid, and you realize, oh, I just wounded them. And that's even in the unintentional realm.
Yeah.
And they have experienced that sentence or that action completely different than the other one. Yeah. And so it's not even just that we may have had parents that were very cruel to us. That could be part of our story. We also may have parents that were very well intended, but didn't know us well enough or didn't know themselves well enough. And we're all going to emerge from childhood with wounds, both intentional and unintentional. And what do we do with that? Where do we take those? It's so important. And then when I think about what frame do I put around my life where my best self emerges? Ooh. So, as an adult parent, as a parent of adult children, there will be times when I look at the parts of my kids that are unfinished and not done and still broken and wounded, and realize that I had a part in that. And as a parent, that can send me spinning into really awful inner voices of self-criticism, and it's all my fault. And then when I tell myself a different story, that I don't think I did any of that on purpose. Or if I did, I can be forgiven from it. And if I put the frame around it of, I love those kids and I'm still in the process of learning to love them and God still loves me, my best self emerges. So
Yeah.
I start then looking at the frame that I put around whatever circumstances it is in my life, my leadership, my children, and I'm starting the journey of choosing the frame that allows my best self to emerge.
Yes. Yes. Because all of the circumstances and the facts will be the same. It just depends on the frame or the lens that you use
to a large
to look at it.
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to go back for a second to when you were talking about different practices, because one of my favorite things that I've heard you say, and gosh, this has been 15 years ago, maybe it's before I became a mom. And you were talking about, where do you experience the presence and the pleasure of God most in your life? And that's, get in that stream, run down that pathway, because that is everything to connect you to God. And you're talking about when you were a mom to young kids and to sit down and read your Bible and pray every morning was like a joke. And you were if one more person tells me to sit down and read my Bible and pray and journal, I am going to shove it up there. And you may not have said exactly like that, but that's what
I don't think that's what I said, but I'm sure that's what I meant, actually.
It's just, it was so freeing for me to know, reading scripture and praying, absolutely non-negotiable, need to find their way into my practices. But perhaps they find their way into my practices better when I am out in nature, when I am with friends around a good meal, when I am studying for something. There's other ways that those two non-negotiables find their way into my practice.
That's a good way to say it. I love that.
That I definitely will feel the presence and the pleasure of God more when I am doing that. So
I agree. I just remember, with 3 little kids, and then somebody says the phrase quiet time, and you pull those words apart and you're like, quiet time? And you're putting them together. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't have either one of those right now.
Yes.
And again, I was with Dallas Willard years ago. He was leading a conference and my husband was interviewing him and he asked Dallas about the practice of quiet time. And I'll never forget. I mean, there were hundreds of pastors in the room and Dallas kind of chuckled. And then the next thing he said caused an intake of breath in the room. And he said, the idea of a quiet time was invented about 100 years ago. You all realize that, don't you?
Yeah.
It is not. Yeah. It is a new practice. It's fine. It's not the end all and be all. It's not the only one. It's not the primary one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you take the values of being in scripture, reflecting, being quiet, and the form doesn't, the essence is what's important. The form, the answer to the form is yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And you also talk about how Jesus didn't journal.
No, Jesus never journaled. Never, never. So let's just keep that in mind as we beat ourselves up for not journaling every day.
It's just freeing. All of this is freeing so that you can lead. I have a friend who says that our job is to lead ourselves to our best self.
Yes.
And I think it's through the power of the Holy Spirit for people of, Jesus people. But that's our job, is to lead ourselves to our best self that we have been created to be.
We should all have that tattooed somewhere on our body.
Let's do it on Sunday.
Yeah, Nancy. Well, sure. Okay.
You're not into it.
No, that's just so great. And I think, I don't say much different. People will talk about, what do you say different to women in leadership than you do men? And it's very little, very little. I think good leadership is good leadership. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. But the one thing I do talk about with women that gets the most resonance more quickly than with men is that internal critical voice. And as soon as I say that phrase, the face of women in the audience is just oh yes, I know her. I have a name for her. I don't like her, but she's very loud. And so, how do we rest free of her? And then how do we avoid the sin of comparison?
Yes.
Because it's comparison that drives us to feel like we have to do a quiet time every morning. We have to do it the way Lisa's doing it or April's doing it. And at the very end of John 21, Jesus' response to Peter when Peter commits the sin of comparison, his tone of voice to Peter is more vitriolic than when he met the woman caught in adultery.
Yeah.
He is gentle to her, and
Yeah.
to Peter he says, what is that to you if I allow him to remain alive until I return? You follow me. You have to live in your own story. And most days I want somebody else's story, or at least my version of their story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a whole chapter in your book called The Hardest Person to Lead, which is yourself. Spoiler alert. But there's a section that I want to read and then have you elaborate on, because I think this is really important. Leaders ought to be the most self-aware people in the room. I'm talking about the kind of self-awareness that makes you comfortable in your own skin. You know who you are and who you aren't. You lean into and lead out of your strengths. You have words for your brokenness. And while you may wish you had none, you know that you do, and you know what they are, and you know that other people know, and you wouldn't have it any other way.
Yes. Yes.
Talk to us more.
So that and boy, this just affects so much in our lives. If you know that about yourself, you can get comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
And we all know people like that, and we want to be like them. And that's one of the things they do really well, is they know who they are and who they aren't. And also then when somebody gives you feedback, Nancy, you felt very impatient in the meeting today. My first response isn't defensiveness. It's, oh, I've heard that word before. I gave some feedback recently to somebody who was very intimidating to give feedback to. And I said, I'm not the kind of person, I'm a pretty low maintenance girl. I don't need a lot of encouragement, but I feel like I get none from you. And it leaves me wondering, am I the right person to be doing this work? And if I'm not, let's find somebody else. And without blinking an eye, he said, oh, I hear this all the time. I'm terrible at encouragement. I need to get better at it. Thank you for reminding me. I'm always challenging people. I'm always stretching people. And I said, I love that. But he just so easily owned it.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I really admire that.
Yeah.
Because we all have something.
Oh,
so what is it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. Talk to us and maybe share a couple of resources or ideas of how you have cultivated some self-awareness that has increased your self-leadership over the years.
Sure. The first thing is I watch other people who aren't, and I don't want to be, I'm embarrassed for them. Like it's everybody else sees it in them.
Yeah.
Everybody else is talking about it when they leave the room. I don't want to, that's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
So then that's the motive for, okay, what will get me to the place? Because this is really hard work.
Yes.
So the next thing I would say is all the self-assessment tools that there are. When people roll their eyes at me and say, I don't care what my Myers-Briggs is, I don't care what my Enneagram is, it's like, oh, honey.
Yeah, I get so mad. I have no tolerance anymore.
And again, I get it. People can misuse it and become very narcissistic and self-absorbed. That's not the way to use it. But any chance I have to learn a little bit more about how I'm naturally wired, therefore how I'm going to communicate, interact with people, use power, make decisions, all those things is just going to make me a better leader and a better human being.
Yeah.
So I bring my curiosity to it, and then I cringe a little. Like, in the Enneagram, when you get your number right, you read through it and you think, oh, I would like not to be this number. Well, then you probably got the right number.
Yeah.
And then, it's so powerful on teams when you can talk with ease about each other's stuff in a way that everybody still loves you, but they're very well aware of your junk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The Enneagram, I think, has been hands down the most helpful self-awareness tool that I've ever used.
Well, I would say the Enneagram and the daily email from the EnneagramInstitute.com.
Get it every morning. It's
you can go to daily. Well, it actually comes at night, but I tell everybody don't open it at night.
Oh, because then you won't sleep.
No, you won't sleep at all. If you go to EnneagramInstitute.com, click on the Learn tab, there's a way to sign up for what April's referring to as this free email, and it'll just eviscerate your soul.
Yeah.
And then it'll rebuild it.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. It's the Ennea Thought of the Day. And it's really great because you can subscribe to 2 numbers. And so some people will subscribe to 2 numbers if they're not quite sure what type they are. Some folks will subscribe to their primary type and then their wing.
Yeah.
I subscribe to my type and to Brian's type.
Perfect.
And that has been such a helpful thing in our marriage to have some shared language. And
Yes.
we just had a conversation last night about something within the Enneagram that I was like, after 20 years of knowing you and loving you,
still learning.
This is like a light bulb effect for me with you. And he was like nodding his head like, you're a slow learner, babe. But it's really helpful.
Well, it's hard enough to learn about yourself. Now you got to do the same deep dive with other people, your kids, your friends, your team members, your spouse.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong journey.
But I do think the more that you are self-aware and the more work that you do, the easier it is to do that with others, in relationship with others.
That's really well said. That's exactly right.
Yeah, because you just have those tools and you're listening. And I love that you used the word curiosity earlier. I mean, the world is your teacher, Nancy.
Yeah.
And not these isolated moments like a quiet time where it's like, this is when I'm learning or being transformed. The curiosity factor is really important for leaders to be able to learn from all the things at all times and then integrate them as best we can. So, all right, I want to take a turn here.
Okay.
And you've already tapped on this a couple of different times, but you are the best team builder that I know. And I've never been on your team, but I have watched you build teams over the years, and you are just remarkable. And one of the things that you have taught me is that if you were to define team, and maybe you've got a different definition now, but you define team for me as a group with a goal. Because it's not just a team is more than one person, but a team is actually going after something. They're on mission. Right. They want to accomplish this vision or to see this goal worked itself out. And otherwise you're just a group of friends, or you're at a country club, or you're, whatever, at a party.
Just hanging out.
So tell me why team is so significant, both in life and in leadership.
Well, I think team is community. That's what it is. And community usually has a purpose. And next to the word gospel, I think community is the most powerful word in Scripture.
Yeah.
It's what Jesus prayed for before he went to Gethsemane. Yeah. It's what he modeled. You know, he chose his disciples within the first 2 chapters of 2 of the Gospels and in the first 4 chapters of the other 2.
Yeah.
Just immediately when he decided my public ministry begins, he put a team around him. And if he needs a team, I'm going to guess I probably do too, and you probably do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just more fun to do it together. You know, there's no one person is adequate for the task.
Mm-mm.
It's just simply not. And then the growth that happens spiritually and personally, and then the goals that get accomplished and the work that gets done, it's just a profound crucible for all of life. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm in the early stages of launching a company, and I am very much in team building mode. And, it's in some ways it could be just me, myself, and I have realized that I am both the kind of leader, and I want to be the kind of leader that does not come up with a vision on a mountaintop by myself in isolation, and then comes to the people and says, this is what we're all going to do. Follow me in this. But to form vision and to figure out the mission and the stuff that we're going to go after. I want to do that with people in the company of other women and men that are going to take us to these places that we need to go.
Right. And, Jesus did that. I mean, what's ironic is Moses didn't go up on the mountain for a vision. Moses came down with the 10 commandments. He didn't come down with a vision of what Israel was going to do and where they were going to go.
Yeah.
So, the picture of leadership in Scripture is not consistently somebody that goes off alone and gets a vision and comes back and then leads people.
Yeah.
It's most often a very collaborative, community-based effort, like the Trinity.
Yep.
Like the Trinity.
Oh my gosh. It all goes back. It's all connected.
There you go.
Max Dupree mentored you?
He did for so many years and was just amazing.
And Dallas Willard. I mean...
Yeah, Dallas Willard to a degree. I think John was around Dallas more than I was, but I was definitely and benefited in really remarkable ways from that friendship. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, those are very, very deep wells of wisdom. And I've
Yeah.
quoted Max for years. I didn't remember that he mentored you, but he talks
Yeah.
about how leadership starts with reality, with defining reality. And you think it actually
Yeah.
starts before that with vision. So kind of walk us
Well,
through like vision
I
and
actually,
reality and team.
I think it starts with defining reality. Like you know, and again, I usually always collaborate on the vision. I may have a general idea,
Yeah.
but something gains momentum
Yeah.
when everybody gets to play.
Yeah.
And my job is to encourage both their spiritual gifts and their ideas, and then teach about the values of ego and how do we be happy when somebody else's idea, quote unquote, wins, and how do we want to give our thoughts and feedback, but really let the best idea emerge. And then how do we all gather our gifts and our talents and our energies around that to make it happen?
Yeah.
So that really whatever vision I may have in the beginning will always pale in comparison to the emerging vision, because it's all of God's people.
Yeah.
And you always have to start in reality. And, you know, Andy Stanley's another great one that talks about starting in reality. And there's no way you can take one step into the vision of the future. You have to take multiple steps, and it takes years. So both, you know, the vision's really the easy part. And I'm a visionary team building leader, but visionary leadership gets written about in such a sexy way that is so unhelpful. It's the execution that makes the difference. Anybody can sit around and pontificate about what would a perfect world look like, or if all my ideas worked. That's the easy part.
Yeah.
You know, it's putting the vision down long enough to get people around, and then do the messy work of working with people to make something happen over time.
Okay, so say you're a leader that's listening to this conversation right now, and you're designing this vision. You're designing where you want to go and what you do with your work. And you know, they're nodding their head going, okay, yeah, team is important. I need other people. I don't have it all within me. I've got to pull other people to the conversation and into the work with me. Where do you start? How do you actually build a team that is strong? And what are qualities that you look for in teammates, that kind of stuff?
Well, that's where I do think the vision helps. So if you have, you know, I did work with Pat Lencioni for about 12 years as a consultant, and, you know, having your strategic anchors. So you have the vision, you have the preferred view of the future if everything were to work. What are your 3 strategic anchors? What are the 3 pillars that you're building around? And then those pillars will help tell me, I need somebody that's passionate about this, that's competent around this, and whose character is well developed enough to bear the weight of their giftedness. I also think I push back pretty hard on people that talk about character, competency, and chemistry. The chemistry piece really gets under my skin.
Really?
Because I feel like, oh, absolutely. It's like, okay, we're the jocks and the cheerleaders again. And we're only going to work with people that we get along with. That's baby leadership. That's leadership 101. Jesus's team was a hot mess. They didn't get along. He was always angry. He was often angry at them and chiding them. And then we think, oh, I have leaders all the time in the Bay Area, pastors that say, you know, I've been in ministry long enough now that I only want to work with people I get along with. And I'm like, well, good luck with that.
That's a really weak team. Yeah, it's very
That's not the gospel either.
No.
It's not the gospel. And then somehow we think we should have these teams that just click all the time. Well, I would just encourage you to reread the Gospels. You know, that's not what happened with Jesus's team. So why are your expectations like that? So I think your main so if you're building a company and you want to do consulting and you want to do events and you want to do intellectual property and thought leadership, you're going to have people that are good at that are competent. But then you also have to have people whose character can bear the weight of that giftedness. And so you have to go looking, and, you know, I don't have the numbers that are data driven, but maybe you'll have to have 15 or 20 conversations before you get to one person that might work in that situation.
Gosh, that's really good. Chemistry is baby leadership.
It's baby leadership. Baby leadership. Yep. I mean, it's just like when Jesus says, what good is it if you love those who already love you?
Yeah.
Even the heathens do that. part of the brilliance of a team is putting together people that are really gifted and wired very differently from each other. And sometimes that's going to make for great team dynamics, but most of the time it's going to be really hard in the team dynamics area.
Yeah, I think it's Sally Krawcheck, I think that's her last name, talks about how diverse teams outperform competent teams all day, every day. And that's become a very significant value in my leadership.
I love that.
Specifically like ethnic and racial diversity, because my little corner of the universe as a white, Midwestern raised middle class girl is a very small corner of the universe. And I've learned so much from folks who are very different from me. And it's created like this insatiable hunger to build teams that are like that.
And then you'll be able to better work with your clients who are going to also be very different from you.
Which this ties back into self-leadership. Like if you don't know who you are and what you can bring, I mean, the question that I was asked years ago on repeat is like, what are the things that only you can do? Do those things well, and then build the team around all the things that you can't do and shouldn't do and suck doing. And then we can do much better work together.
And then every once in a while, show up and do a few of the things you're not very good at to help somebody else out.
Yeah.
You know, be a servant every once in a while in that regard. And building teams, and then you cultivate the team dynamics over time. You cultivate the learning, the spiritual formation, the relationships, the celebration, the feedback, all of those components of cultivating a great team over time is really important.
You talk about how leadership is development. It's people development. And I feel like there's still such a gap in that a lot of times leaders just want to hire people or work with people that are just doing the job, but the development piece is really missing. What kind of development is crucial for you as a visionary team building leader?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first is when I do one-on-ones with my team members, and one of the things I learned from Lencioni that is so counterintuitive but so good is one-on-ones are the most overutilized, under-effective ways to lead a team. So, there are people that do one-on-ones every week, every month. I do them every other month.
Okay.
And that's all I do. Most of the dynamics of building a team need to happen in the team meetings when everybody's there. So I do development in the team around conversations. Sometimes I bring a devotional, a reading, and something that we reflect on. Sometimes it's a leadership thought. Sometimes it's just the feedback in the team of, now, when you said that, you felt a little angry right there. Am I reading that right? Or is there something we need to unpack here? So you just start doing that with the team. I also do it in my one-on-ones. We talk about how are you feeling being on the team? Where are the points that you feel tension and scrapes, and where does it feel like it's flowing and working well? And then I ask my team, I do it for them. And then I ask them once a year, I want you to bring something to me that you would like to do an experience. An opportunity that might be 1 day or 2 days, and I will pay for it for you to go experience it. And every other year we do something that's a little bit more on the pricey side. So we've done Ultimate Leadership with Henry Cloud. We've done some more formalized things like that. And then the off year, I have them do something simpler, like here's a leader I've met in the Bay Area recently. I'd love to go shadow them or take them out to lunch. And then I look for opportunities of people and experiences that I think they should intersect with, and I will kind of require them to do that as well. And then we usually read a book twice a year together, and then have a half day where we just kind of unpack it. We just finished Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, and we're trying to find a half a day where we can just come away and share some of the stuff in it that we've learned. We just finished Rooting for Rivals before that, which is a really easy book to read, but it is about kingdom thinking in a way of, let's not see each other as competitors. Let's view ourselves as all working together.
It's really intentional. That's the first thing I'm thinking. And it's, there's a lot of different layers to it. But a lot of that development is happening in real time as a team.
Right. A lot of it. And then I have a little beaded bracelet I keep in my car that's kind of like a rosary, only I don't assign every bead because I would forget. But I will just grab that when I'm driving sometimes and go through my staff. And I don't, right now we have a fairly small team. So I'll just hold the bead for a minute or two and pray for them. and, count that also in my learning to love them well and be on their side.
Okay, so one of the things that you have taught me too that has been a game changer for me is that the greatest team breaker is unresolved conflict. It's not conflict, which is what I grew up learning, is that conflict was bad, but it's unresolved conflict, because conflict is inevitable with people in relationships on a team. It's going to happen if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
But you've taught me so much about conflict. One of the things, again, that you said, I remember driving with you in Irvine, California, going from one place to, I could take you almost to the exact same spot that we were at. And you said to me, don't pick and choose your battles, right size your battles. Yeah. So can you unpack just that idea of what healthy conflict looks like and why picking and choosing your battles is the wrong conversation?
Yeah. And, I don't mean that to the extreme of fight about everything, but I think more often than not, we minimize what's happened, and we say, under the guise of choosing our battles, I'm just going to let this go. I'm just going to let this go. And you do that long enough, and you build up a tub of resentment in you that will come out sideways often, either towards the person or worse, alone with another person on the team, away from the person you're frustrated with. It just comes out in all sorts of sideways. And actually, I don't know if that was the exact phrase, but I think I learned that from Lencioni. And he just said, if you were a fly on the wall at my team meetings, you would be uncomfortable. You would be looking around thinking, wow, they are just kind of going at it. And again, when I look at the Gospels, Jesus uses difficult conversations more than encouragement to spiritually form people. So how did I lose that? And do I have the courage to have it? And do I have the ability to say it well? So I think Pat's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is really helpful in this regard. I think the book Crucial Conversations is phenomenal. It's a little dense in the fact that it puts so much into what could be a very simple framework. But if you read through it, you will get the main ideas on how to have these conversations really well. They're the main thing that transforms us. Les and Leslie Parrott talk about conflict is the only way to intimacy. Yep. So the very thing we're looking for, we avoid the pathway that gets us there.
Gosh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up here, but I always ask 3 questions at the end of every episode around this process of define, design, and do, because I want to help people to start creating like a map. And it's nonlinear. You will approve, because you can't get from point A to point. You can get from point A to point B in a lot of different ways, and it will often look like progress and then going backwards. So here's the first question. I want you to answer them like 60 seconds or less. Just kind of your first initial gut response. You ready? Okay,
I'm ready.
So as we think about defining reality, how do you give yourself a reality check?
Mostly with questions I ask myself in my head. I feel like more than I journal, I self-reflect a lot inside my head. And I'm an extrovert, so I don't know why I do it that way. Or I talk about it with people, and I'll say, this is what I feel like is going on. Do you see it this way, or am I missing something? So I will reflect a lot inside, and then I will also have a few people I bounce it off of, kind of as a reality check.
My coach will say to me, ask me the question, like, what's going on? And then I'll usually answer, and then he'll say, okay, what's really going on? And it just kind of keeps taking me down.
Makes you, that's good.
Okay, so as we think about designing a life that you love, designing leadership that matters, designing, meaningful work, what's a practice that you do intentionally so that you're really proactive in your life?
I kind of do it in 6-month seasons. So I will sit down and think, for the next 6 months, how, what are the 3 or 4 physical activities I want to make sure I'm doing on a regular basis? What are the team issues that I want to work on? What are the meetings I need to have? And I kind of map it out loosely for the next 6 months. And then I think whatever that month will be, August, I'm going to check back in with myself and see, is this still working? Do I need to make changes?
So what's one practice
I just never lock into something for a lifetime.
Yeah, because you're always changing. You're growing.
Well, I am. And I'm a P on the Myers-Briggs, so that's
And
probably
a 7
why.
on the Enneagram. So
Yeah, well, there
have
you
some
go.
variety.
Yeah, and I need to have fun, because if I'm not having fun,
what's the point?
Something's wrong.
All right, so you got to do the work as you
Mm-hmm.
actually get from where you are to where you want to be. So what's a 1 degree trajectory shift that you have made that over time it changed everything for you?
Around getting the work done? Oh, and as simple as it sounds, putting the big rocks in first. One of the things I notice that I will do as a 7 is if I have meetings that are important to be having, sometimes my avoidance mechanism will be, I'll just get busy meeting with whoever asks me to meet. And my busyness will make me think I'm getting the right stuff done, instead of living with the silence and the no meetings until I get the right meetings in place. And that for me has changed a lot of things.
Yep, I could do a better job.
And so busyness is not the same as effectiveness. I'm not really interested in efficiency so much, but I am interested in effectiveness. And I will substitute busyness because it makes me think I'm being effective.
That's great. Thank you. So I know that you're not like a bustling person on the social media or in the internet world,
No,
but is there a place that people can find you if they want to learn more from you and follow you and the work that you're doing?
Wow. I'm actually on Lent off of Facebook. For the most part, I'll go on, once or twice a week to make sure I don't have any messages. I'm on Facebook, but I hardly ever post, but somebody could connect with me there is probably the easiest way.
Do you have a website?
I'm also on Instagram, but I don't post. I think I probably do around my books, but I never check it. I hate marketing. I've written 3
tell us
books,
names of
so
your
maybe
books, and we'll post those in the show notes, but people can get those. What are those 3 books?
I wrote a book called Looking for God, An Unexpected Journey Through Tattoos, Tofu, and Pronouns. Then I wrote the leadership book that you mentioned, and then I wrote a book called Seeing in the Dark, Finding God When There's No Light, or I don't even remember what the subtitle is, but it's about finding God when everything's dark.
Oh, important. Back to the brokenness.
Yeah.
All right, Nancy, I wanted you on the show from very beginning, season 1, and halfway through season 2, you are here, and it was the perfect place because you designed things well. And
I'm happy thinking about people listening both to this podcast, but all of your podcasts. If something could be said that helps for even just a minute, that's the kind of encouragement all of us need to keep going.
Well, thank you for leading from the fringe. Thank you for being a woman that showed me at 18 years old what was possible, and for doing that for, 30 plus years now. You have led from all kinds of margins and invited people into it. So thank you for your work and your leadership.
And there were women that did that for me when I was your age at 18. So we're just doing it for each other. Thank you, April.
Love you, Nancy. I'll see you on Sunday.
Okay, love you too. Bye.
Hey, friends. Do you love podcasts like the one you just listened to? Have you ever dreamed about having your own? Well, my name is Michael, and I work for Truthwork Media. We believe that everyone has a story, and every story deserves a podcast. Let us help you get started. Look us up at www.truthworkmedia.com, fill out our questionnaire, and I'll schedule a time to talk. It's really that easy. Truthwork Media. Everyone has a story. Yours needs a podcast.